Let's go ahead and start talking about it. So today we want to kind of talk about investor pyramids, acquiring massive wealth through real estate. I literally saw this now 40 years ago. And it was something that I actually read in a book that was in a college class, and I did a little bit of research on it. And this is kind of an investor concept that has been around since the 40s and 50s, the 1940s, not the 1840s. And honestly, this is probably the most sound, dynamic way of acquiring real estate. And I really think that everything else has been predicated on it over the years when it gets right down to it. Used to be a fella in town, Randy Van Rieken. He ran the Southern Nevada School of Real Estate, which was up on West Sahara. His father was from somewhere in Minnesota or somewhere. And his father had used this concept and had literally acquired 1,000 houses in his lifetime. Kind of throughout the Midwest and some out here. And I mean, if you can imagine, and he did it basically using this process, which, as you'll see, requires no money. It requires one house. And it's just kind of a crazy concept. Now, the value of this is whether you do part of it, some of it, or all of it, the concept is it works for potentially everybody. And who does it work best for? It works for younger people. Works for everybody, but it works dynamically for younger people. So Anthony, that whole group, a lot of people, you probably know a lot of people you kind of age group wise know. And the dynamics of this, and we'll talk about as we go, is you start doing it now, and somewhere within 10 or 20 years, which the unfortunate thing is for most people who are in their 20s and 30s, 20 years from now seems like forever. But should you start doing it, suddenly you're 40 years old, you've got millions of dollars worth of real estate, you never have to worry about another thing your entire life. And so that becomes kind of the dynamic of it. So this is, and I'm not pointing you guys out, but I'm pointing at you guys. But, and this would be something to drag in Anthony for. This is something that when you talk to people, and you go, well, here's something you could do that'll make you independently wealthy for life. This is something that they could do. And as I say, it generally works better with younger than it would. Well, it works good for everybody, but I mean, it's something that if you started younger, it would be fantastic for you when you get right down to it. And so the basic, am I arrowing? Just space bar. So the concept of it is simply leverage, okay? And for investors, for real estate, leverage is a term that you'll hear thrown around all of the time when it gets right down to it. The reality of it is leverage is what? Yeah, OPM. In life, you always want to do what? OPM, use other people's money. Now, for us as real estate agents, and especially for us as real estate agents in Las Vegas, the 10,000-pound elephant in the room is what? What happened 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, right? The whole collapse of the mortgage world and all of that stuff. What you've got to convince people is that, look, that was not consumer driven, okay? That was not people that got an ARM loan. That was not, there was a lot of things that happened, but if you really want to know what happened at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of books out on it about it. There's a great movie that's still coming out. I think it's in the next couple of weeks with Brad Pitt and a whole bunch of people that talks about the housing short sale crisis, the whole 9 yards. It really was a bank-driven activity. And it's starting to come out more and more and more. There's a whole bunch of stuff that came out immediately, but we now know that it was a bank-driven activity. So, you know, Sean, that's one thing you're going to have problems with, if you will, with millenniums, is because they've lived that. And they've lived that through the eyes of their parents. And so a lot of people that are kind of in that millennium age, that 30 down to 18, that were kind of conscious of what happened over the last 8 years, you know, they may be looking at a house and going, you know what, I never want to own a house as long as I lived. You know, it caused mom and dad to get divorced. It was the biggest nightmare. All I remember is we were constantly almost going to be thrown out of the house for 5 years. And finally we had, you know, they remember that nightmare thing. We've got to have enough knowledge to counter-sell against that and say, guys, look, that was not your mom and dad's fault. That was not the seller. That was not the buyer's fault. That was not the homeowner's fault. That was a banking crisis, and that'll come out as time goes on. So OPM, other people's money, is simply the strongest thing that we have. So the basic concept of this, and we call it pyramiding, not a pyramid scheme, but a pyramid because ultimately what it kind of ends up looking like. So the basic premise of it is that you need to acquire that first rental property. Now, some people acquire that first rental property, which is just their first house that they live in, and there's nothing wrong with that. You've got to get a property that's going to go up in value. Sean, you don't even know that you're doing it, but you and your brother are almost doing this right now. You've got a house, you're going to sell the house, you're going to buy a couple more houses. You can either hold on to those for a while, or you're going to flip them out and you're going to buy more houses. You guys are kind of in the position where you're doing this. And don't take this wrong, but you could care less about the house, right?
No.
It's just a house, right? And that is the investor's mental mindset. And so this is where it's hard to do it with your primary residence, because when you go home and tell your spouse, oh, we're moving to a different house, or we're doing this, or we're doing that, or what, they don't always buy into that real well. We're okay with that, but it kind of throws them sideways. And so from a real estate agent, when I'm talking with somebody, I'm going to say, look, Venus, you've got to buy a rental property. Well, what about the house that I'm in? Well, that's fine, but you know, you're trying to, you know, acquire wealth and, you know, investment properties. Let's get you an investment property. Get them in that mindset of what that is going to look like. Okay. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to acquire rental property. You know, my target purchase price is $100,000. That's what I'm going to use dynamically for this. Right now, anybody done the search lately on Vegas? How many $100,000 houses are there still in town?
Not many. There's a couple that I'm 109.
Right. Well, there are, but I mean, if you get into the whole town, there's still there. So it's still a possible activity, and it's going to be a moving target to an extent. But a $100,000 purchase price works well. You know, be up front with the people. You need $25,000 in order to buy an investment property. You're gonna have to do what? Put 20% down, and you're gonna have to have some money for closing costs and impounds and everything else. Don't start off with an investor being squeaky, being tight about money, right? You don't want to tell them, oh, you can get into this one for 5% and you can do this. All of that stuff can be done, but get the mental mindset that you're looking for somebody that's got, you know, $25,000 that can go in full price, pop a deal, and it works out well for them. So $20,000 down payment, $5,000 closing costs, then it becomes up to you to basically find them the property that's going to match. To be successful, you're going to need the following things to occur. So there's a little bit of magic in this. Each home must cash flow and must be able to service the debt, okay? Don't fudge the 20%, meaning don't fudge the 20% down payment. Because oftentimes the 20% down payment is enough that's a difference between cash flow and not cash flow. if the property doesn't cash flow a ton, that's not an issue, but it needs to cash flow because you don't want the investor to be coming out of pocket every single month with a little bit of money, right? So a lot of times that 20% is going to be the difference in that. The total rent, number two, the total yearly rent must be in excess of the total yearly debt, okay? Taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, whatever all of those things are, make sure that they're not going to be in a negative cash flow position. So this is kind of stuff that you've got to figure out. It's stuff that you'll learn as you go. Means you got to factor in vacancy repairs. Well, how the hell do you do that?
So HOAs is part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, HOA, any account debt servicing, you know, any of those things that are going to ultimately, I mean, if they, which they shouldn't do, but if they're self-managing the property from LA, which we all know they legally can't do, but if they want to do that, I'm not going to stop them. Their travel back and forth, right? I mean, whatever all of those big numbers are, you want them to come out with some sort of a positive number at the end.
So question, let's say that you are able to get a property for 100,000 or less, and in the rent price that you're going to rent it, the HOA is covered in there.
Yes, you're fine.
Do you still factor that in your total yearly debt?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
still do?
I would add it up because it's going to be a plus on one side, it's going to be a negative on one side.
Okay.
So just everything that's associated with the cost of operating that property has to be figured into that cost analysis. So if they're driving in from LA once a month to whatever, check on the property, or I don't know, whatever it is that they're going to do, and that's a $500 trip, then that's a $6,000 deficit to the operation of the property. And you just want to make sure that they understand the numbers and they understand it so they make it cash flow positively.
Another question.
Yeah.
So what happens if they don't have the 20% down, but they're just going to do an FHA? I know they have to owner occupy.
Right. And you can do it. You can do it. And is it okay to do it? Yeah, absolutely. And is it what we do as real estate agents? Yeah, absolutely. And it's how a lot of people got in trouble. Is it completely halfway illegal? Yeah, the answer is yes. But we all know what the deal is. If you have an FHA loan and you want to get another house with an FHA loan, can you? Remember, FHA says you can only have what? One loan. So if you have an FHA loan, can you get another FHA loan?
Yes,
And the answer is absolutely yes. And you go, well, how the hell does that work? Well, it's a government program is how it works. Because why? Because if I live in a big house and I'm getting divorced and I'm going to have a change in my family status, I can buy another FHA loan. If I transfer from one area to another area, which, believe it or not, if I work in Green Valley and I live in Henderson and I get a new job in Summerlin at Town Square, does that count? It does count.
I thought that was a mileage.
No, they've decided that because the traffic is such that is enough of a variable that they will allow you to do that. If I live in a condo and I'm getting married and we're combining families, I need a bigger house. So the answer becomes yes. Now, I say this all the time because it's true. If you had a 4-bedroom house and you're up in Anthem and you decided you wanted to live in a 2-bedroom condo because you want to be down on the strip. I'm not going to say they're both FHAs. I'm going to say one's a house and now you're going to buy a house down on the strip and it's an FHA on the strip. It's a condo, which I don't know what community you could finance, but that's a different story. But, you know, could you do that? Yeah, you could. And then as soon as you buy that condo, and you're coming out of 6,000 square feet in Anthem, and you're coming into 850 square feet, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath on the Strip, and you walk in the house, and the first thought in your mind is what? Why? I can't live in this house. It's too small. Could you then rent the property out? Yeah. It's not against the law to change your mind. And that's how people do that. And I'm not telling you to do that, but I'm telling you that is how people do it. So yes, if they wanted to buy an FHA house and then they move into it, and 6 months down the road it doesn't really work out for them, so they decide to rent it out, is that going to be a problem? Not really, even though they signed something that said what? I'm going to own or occupy this property. The people that got in the biggest problem was straw buyers, and you never want to do that. So you don't want to have somebody else go in, put their name on it, all of that. But they buy it as an FHA. It's their primary residence, and 6 months later they decide it doesn't work for them, and they want to rent it out. Can they do that? And the answer becomes yes. Could they turn around in 6 months and probably buy another FHA loan? Yeah, they probably could. You know, even though that's an existing FHA loan, they're going to have to write a letter. They're going to have to tell a story. They're going to have to find an underwriter that's going to buy their BS, but they may actually get that second house. And so, yeah, because this is what a lot of us have done. You know, your first house becomes your what? Your first rental, right? And then your second house becomes your second rental. And your third house is hopefully one you like, or by then you're ready to get divorced, and then you lose both. You know, but some other story happens. but you know, that's the dynamics. So yes, they could do that, but ultimately, he's going to be for it or she's going to be for it. Meaning, the husband's going to be for, well, let's buy this house, and in 6 months we'll buy another house. We'll rent this house out. That's going to be great for the husband, but it's probably not going to be great for the wife. If it's the wife that's into it, then it's probably not going to be great for the husband. Those things happen, and so it just is the dynamics of it. But yeah, you can do it, but if you can get them to do a straight up 20%, that's fine. And the first step regardless works, because the first step is simply that you do, well, let me go run through this. So these numbers you know, and if you don't know them, memorize them. Okay, so here's the standard rule of thumb when it gets right down to it. If I have $100,000 purchase price, my PI payment, or my payment, if you will, I always figure out to be somewhere around $650. Okay, that's in a pretty good ballpark when it gets right down to it. And if you quoted somebody 600 on 100,000, then you'd be what? You'd be okay. You'd be okay by $60. So, and it really doesn't matter what the interest rate is. It doesn't matter how much money they put down. All of that stuff. It's going to be right in that ballpark. So, $100,000 purchase price, loan amount of $80,000, 5.5% interest rate. That's a little bit higher than normal because why? And it's an investor. And investors are always going to have a little bit higher interest rate. So, if they're an investor buyer, should they plan on getting a 4.2 or a 3.9? Or no, they're going to get a 5.5, a 6.5, a 7.5, maybe even get an 8.5.
So wait a second. If they said that, yeah, they're an investor, but I thought that if you came in with 20% down, you're going to get whatever the rate is.
Sometimes not.
Really?
And I think a preparatory statement for that, Lewis, would simply be, hey, look, your interest rate's probably going to be 5.5, 6.5. If they go in and they get 4.5, then what?
They're happy.
They're super happy. So build a worst case scenario than a best case scenario. But there's a lot of things that could happen. But I just always kind of go, hey, your interest rate's going to be a little bit higher. Not much, and
unless they say they're going to own or occupy it.
Unless they say they're going to own or occupy it, and then
Second
they can get whatever that is.
20% down.
Huh?
They can say, I'm giving 20% down, but I'm going to own or
Yeah,
occupy.
and so then at that point, they're going to drop off the PMI, MIP thing. They're going to, and with 20% down, if they turn around and rent it 30 days later, does anybody care? No, not even at all. So it doesn't matter one way or the other if they're putting 20% down, but they could get a better interest rate by saying they're owner occupied, but it's 1% and whatever it is. And this is where we're talking about, make sure it cash flows. If they get 8.5% interest rate, is that okay? Yeah, absolutely. There's no problem with that at all, as long as what? The cash flows. As long as the cash flows numerically, then it doesn't matter what that interest rate is. And this is where, as real estate agents, we talk people into stuff that they really shouldn't do. Should you get an 8.5% interest rate? I don't know. If you bought a house today for $200 and the market goes up 30% by next summer, then the house is now worth how much? $260. And if the difference between 4.3 and 8.5 was $600 a month, you're going to pay how much? $3,600 versus $60,000. That becomes real estate math that you kind of go, oh, that's not supposed to make sense, but all of a sudden what? All of a sudden that makes sense. If I could buy a house today for $200 and I know it's going to go up in value, that's the reason everybody got 1.9% and 0.09% interest only loans back in 2000, 2001, 2002, because we thought and we anticipated that values were going to do what? Going to go through the roof, and they did. And so having that 1.9% negative AM, even though I was adding principal onto my payment each year, appreciation was rising quicker than the negative amortization of the loan was. And so it made financial sense for people to do that, okay? So 546, 100,000, if I rented it for 850, I'd be super happy. A lot of cases, I'm going to probably get what? 8. Or in some areas, I may even get a little bit more, right? I mean, I might find a $100,000 house that, I may get $1,000 out of it for, I don't know what reason why. You go with the ifs, go with the plus minuses on it. But I think that's a fair, amount. So, don't blow smoke, but just kind of go. So the reality of it is I've got a monthly net of 304. I've got a yearly net of 3648. Not including what? Vacancy and move outs and damage and repair. So we got to figure that in, but we're not going to really worry about it at this point. I always kind of do this with people because it makes sense. At 3648, if indeed it did cash flow, and I ended up the year with $3,648 in my bank account, the smartest thing that I could do with that money would do what? Send it back into the mortgage company. And if I did that for 10 years, I'm going to cut out $69,000 of the total loan amount for sending in half that money. And I'm going to cut the note down from 30 years to basically a little bit less than 20 years. So that becomes smart, okay? So there's a couple of things that have to happen for that. So, and we'll hit those in 1 second. So I buy the first house in the first year. In the second year, I've got to season it for a year, right? I've got to season it for a year. At the end of the first year that I'm going to go out, I'm going to do what? I'm going to do a refi on it, or I'm going to try and do a cash out, or I'm going to do something. And I'm going to get money out of the first home so that I can buy the second home, which means I'm going to need how much? 20%, 25,000. So part of this is based on, and good news is we're in this market right now. Part of this is based on that I'm assuming that the market's going to do what? Move up. Good news is it is. Now, I don't want it to move a lot. I want it to move a little. If we can get it go 3 to 10% per year, that's fine. The reality of it is, if the market only went up 5% and my credit's good and I made every single payment on this house, how much do you think the bank would give me? I mean, they'd probably give me 10 or 15 or 20%. They'd probably give me real close to that, even though, because remember, I've got how much in the house?
20%.
I've got 20% in the house, and if it goes up 5%, then I've got 25%. So I can probably go in and borrow close to 20% once again, right? I mean, that becomes the drift of what happens. At the end of the third year, I do the exact same thing, right? So I go in and I have one house, I have the second house, and so then I can have 4 houses, right?
You have like 2 more houses on your third.
Yeah, exactly. So so the first year I have 1 house, the second year I have 2 houses. At the end of the second year, I've got my 2 houses, so I can get 2 more houses, pull money out of each one of those. Now, at this point, it's kind of a weird deal. If you're an investor and you have 2 houses, then the bank says what?
Nothing.
Big freaking deal.
Nothing.
You have 2 houses, congratulations. Huh? Well, it's kind of. Once you get to this point, they're going to go, okay, let's see your P&L statement for the last year. Let's see how you've okay, so you cash flowed these, 2 houses for 2 years, and you've put a little bit of money in the bank, or you've sent money in and paid off the mortgage company. We kind of like you. We'll probably do that. So the third year, you've got the 4 houses, and you're only going to get 1 more. Okay, just that's how it's going to kind of work. So you're going to end up with 6 houses. Now you are above 5. And now when you go into the bank's going to probably let you do what? Pull out money of every single house. Because remember, you've got 5 houses that you've got 20% equity in, even though you've done some refi on them, because you've taken some money and you've paid back a little bit of that money when it gets right down to it. So at that point, you can probably bump it up to 12. Now you're going to start compounding it. So in your 5th year, you're going to do 1 for every single house. And this becomes a lot of work. You now have a full-time job doing what? Yeah, refining houses and managing houses. I mean, that becomes a full-time. You're talking about doing 1 house, every 2 weeks, right? That's a full-time freaking job when it gets right down to it. The 6th year you could do 48. The 7th year you could do 84. The 8th year you're going to get 168. The 9th year you're going to have 336 houses. The 10th year you're going to have 600 houses. So you literally have at 100,000. Basically, $67 million in real estate for a $25,000 cash investment.
And then you can cut it all.
Yeah.
We need to do that.
Well, then you get divorced and the wife gets everything.
Right. And yeah.
Well, why doesn't everybody do that?
Huh?
Why doesn't
Well, it's a lot of work. Honestly, it's a lot of work. And the reality of it is we all hit a comfort zone. If you had 5 houses and they were paying you $2,000 a month, so you make $10,000 for waking up, how much more are you going to do?
I know people who did that, but then they got caught up.
Everybody got burned. Everybody got burned.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying it's the 22-ton elephant in the room. Okay, let's go back and talk about why they got burned. If we really went back and looked at it, a lot of them probably got interest-only loans. A lot of them got a lot of things that did make sense. The other problem was that values did what? Values dropped. So I bought it at $400,000. I had a 2.5% ARM loan that I expected the house was going to go up in value. So I was going to refi in a year and get another 2.2. So my $400,000 payment, was only $800, $900, $1,200. I was renting it out for $1,100. My payment was 12, I'm renting it out for 11, so I'm only doing what?
Paying out 100.
I'm only paying out 100. That's not bad because I anticipate that the value is going to do what? Go up. So I'm at the anticipation. And then when the market turned and value started going down, and then I went to refi that 2.2 and there was no refi on that, and it jumped to 4,000 a month, and I'm getting 1,100 for rent. That's when we started mailing the deeds back into the bank.
So there's another kind of theory at play too, and if the market does start heading down, you should have some free cash flow to average your total prices down. You should be buying more on cash as you get further vested in this process, so that if the average price goes down to 80,000, you can buy 2, and kind of take your total average.
Hold the thought for 1 minute, but then launch again. So that's what leverage is. Okay, that's what leverage is. Here you go, Michael. This is what that is. Remember, on each house you're making what? $3,000. The how you don't get killed in this, because I had a ton of friends. That's a lie. I had 2 friends who survived and then started buying stuff at the auction. So houses that they were buying for 200,000 and 300,000 and 400,000, now they're buying at 36,000. They're buying at 64,000. They're buying at 72,000. And so they acquired a dozen houses over the last 6 years, cash. Very few people figured that out. And you guys, you read my rants and my stories and stuff, and there was, it was a month or so ago, and this jackwad posted a thing on, because somebody was talking about houses and valuation, and somebody posted a thing on Facebook, and it was the same old post. My buddy bought a house for $120,000 2 years ago, and today it's worth $240,000. And of course, my response is what? How many houses did he buy? Well, he only bought 1.
I saw that post.
Well, if he's such a brilliant real estate investor, why didn't he go buy 4 at $120,000? Yeah, he had no money, and he bought 1 because that's all he could afford that day. Michael's great statement of, optically challenged rodents seem to find fallen fruit, rotting fruit from time to time. Meaning what? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. We all get lucky, but to do it, correctly and over time is another thing. So I'm simply going to say there's a ramp-up opportunity that's going to happen for everybody to acquire all of these houses. Keeping in mind that in about year 6 and year 7, what's going to happen? The economy is going to completely collapse again, and we're going to exactly go through what we went through back then. Sadly enough, and Sean, just so you remember, I saw it in the early 70s, still in high school, but I saw it happening then. I saw it in the beginning of the 80s. I saw it in the beginning of the 90s. We saw it in the beginning of the 2000s, and we really saw it in the middle of the 2000s. Our economy and the housing market rides that roller coaster, and they really do say, because if you read the stuff, there's people that are going, it's collapsing now. So there's, so the rise collapse may get small enough. The rise collapse may get small enough that you don't notice it, depending on where you're at and how bad you think it is. The reality of it is, and I used to see this all the time, because people bought their house. People bought their house in 1999 for $200,000, and by 2004 it was worth $450,000, and by 2010 it was worth $180,000, And the first thing they would say is they lost how much money? Yeah, I lost 260, I lost $270,000. It's like, no, you didn't. And in reality, if you didn't sell at this point, you still haven't done what? You still haven't lost. And today the house is probably worth what? Maybe you could be right. I was just going very, very cautiously at 240. Might be that it's 240, 300. So they lost how much money? None. You only lose money when you sell, right? So if you don't sell, it doesn't matter. And this is based on what? This is based on holding, not on flipping. Speaking of flipping, will you flip on the you see? Because I'm getting more worried about Venus. That's not just for you. Okay, so as Michael was saying, and oh, you can open up the thing. You can lift the deal up because it may be off. So you may have to turn it to cool.
It's not on. It is off.
Yeah.
It's on.
Okay. So I said that I recommend that you mail money back in and pay off houses, and that is true. If you do that, then at some point you're going to do what? You're going to own houses free and clear.
Right.
So then not only are you going to send in the 3,600, but you're going to probably send in what? 8,000, or you're going to have 8,000 because your monthly rent right is 850. So you're going to have 8,000 minus taxes and whatever else that you can then start buying other houses within. That becomes your 20% down. You know, that becomes at some point when you're numerically cash flowing in these kinds of numbers, you know, you probably have the money to do what? Just randomly buy a house free and clear cash out of operating funds when it gets right down to it, right? And so this is simply the most simplistic methodology investing in real estate. It takes time because you buy that first house, you got to do what? You got to wait for a year. The second year you own 2 houses. Third year you own 3 houses. It doesn't get interesting until about year 6, which means in the meantime you got to do what? Whatever your daily grind is, you got to keep doing whatever that daily grind is.
I think if you look at it in a different perspective, is if you bought a brand new car, $40,000, $50,000, and financed it for 6 years, and at the end of 6 years you own it outright, you can look at this where you're going to be in year 6.
Yeah.
If you follow the same guidelines, because you exchange your time for a job and get paid whatever it is, right? You've said it.
Yeah, that's the great analogy. You know, we trade time for money.
Exactly. So if you have the patience and time to do this little by little, the stock is cheap. The biggest hurdle is to actually take that first step and realize that it's not a 30-foot wall. It's a pebble that you're just jumping over to do your first one. That's all it is.
Yeah, and the reality of it is, does your first house have to be 100,000? No, there's 40,000. I mean, I keep pushing Anthony. There's a whole bunch of $40,000 houses over in Henderson, and you look at them and you go, what? Oh, hell no.
Right.
Except that.
Yeah, my first job out of school, one of the kids I met at a client, he was 4 years out of school and he had 6 houses.
Yeah.
He started while he was in college. He had his first one, and after a year, he flipped it into 2, and he just kept doing it every year. And he was going to school full time, living on student loans, and then when he got out, he had some income that he could use if he didn't have a job.
A friend of mine, and he used to get his student loan every semester, and guess what he'd do? Buy a house with
I
his
had
student loan
someone
money.
suggested that to me, and I.
Yeah. Oh, I know. You know, the woulda, coulda, shouldas are you know, we've always got these, you know, stacked up in life when it gets right down to it. You know, but here's a conversation, and for a lot of us, and don't take this wrong, but for a lot of us, it's age group wise, we get to be counselors to other people, and that's how you need to kind of look at this. So, you know, when you're talking to Anthony, you go, hey, Anthony, let me show you how to do this. And believe me, buddy, I wish I would have done it when I was your age. Sean, you're on your way. This becomes the cautionary tale that everybody in this room will go, dude, you don't really need a nice car, and you don't need a this and a that and a this and a that. You need to do what? Buy a house every single year so that you've got enough cash flow coming in, and then at some point it goes way over the top. I keep reading all of this stuff, and I'm actually, I like it because it's a research thing for me. And forever, because generationally, we should be going after who? The biggest group of buyers is now who? Millennials. Millennials have now surpassed baby boomers. Baby boomers are moving out into smaller stuff, retirement communities, dying, whatever the hell it is they're doing. Millenniums are a bigger group numerically, and they're on the move. The damage is, as I said earlier, they saw mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, they saw everybody they know got damaged in housing. The interesting thing, though, and we keep reading all this stuff about millenniums, about how they're slackers, they can't do this and that and the other thing. But if you really look at what they're dynamically doing right now, what they're doing dynamically right now is what? Exactly the same thing that we did when we were their age. They're getting married. They're tired of living in mom and dad's basement, house, whatever the case is, so now they're buying houses. They're doing all of the things that every other generation before them has done. And I kind of look at that and go, well, guess what? They didn't get any smarter than us. But I'm hoping that we pass on information and maybe they'll take our word for it. They won't, but I'm telling you, if you can get some of them built into this, and so that's why we're having this conversation, is so you guys understand what this looks like so that they understand what this looks like. I mean, if I go in, and honestly, it's like I said in the beginning, if I only acquired 20 houses, would I be damaged? Yeah, probably not. 20 houses would provide you with a lifetime of income that somewhere, if you started doing it in your 20s or 30s, by the time you're 40 or 50, you'd never go to work another day in your life. And then the reality of it is we know that over time, like it, hate it, whatever the case may be, housing values are probably going to do what in the next 20 years? Go up and down and up and down and up and down, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to be, up. So you get 20 houses at $100,000 each. You're now going to have 20 houses that are going to be at $200,000 each. You can probably sell one house a year and live comfortably. You know what I'm saying? There's dynamically, there's an economic scale in that. So it takes time, it takes patience. You've got to have good credit. We've got a credit lady that's going to start with us in the next week or so. And Michelle's going to start doing, we've got a few things working as far as that. And then it does take a lot of work because, as I said, and younger people much easier than for the rest of us. Even though I still, work, let's say 12 hours a day, it's a big giant lie, huh? I probably work about 10 hours a day. When you're younger, you work what? Working 2 jobs is no big deal, right? I mean, and when I go out to the ranch, I'll work full day out there and I'll come back and do some stuff here. You can do short term, you can work a ton of hours, and that's what it takes. It takes a lot of work because you've got to pretty much go to your normal job and then you've got a second job doing this. And so that's just part of it. In addition to luck and timing, you're going to need the real estate market to move about 5 to 10% per year. Who has to believe that? Yeah, probably all 3. They have to believe that, right? The greatest sales tool that we have is what? Yeah, or fear of loss, right? Fear of loss much greater than fear of gain. If I do nothing, what happens? Well, but wait a minute. If I do nothing, what happens? Yeah, because we just said that in the next 10 years, we all think the prices are going to go where? Up, right? Yeah, they may go up, they may go down, or whatever. But if I do nothing, then I'm going to lose out on opportunities that I had. And don't take this wrong, I'm included in this mix. There's not a person in this room that doesn't wish that they could have gone to the auction 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and bought stuff for 30,000, 40,000, 60,000, 70,000. You can still do it. It's just not dynamically as good as it was then, but we can still do it. We've talked about that. That's an opportunity, and that's kind of what we want to look at. So they have to believe that the market's going to move, and everybody pretty much believes that. You've got to have cash income to live on in addition to your house pyramid monies, meaning we don't want to sell them on the opportunity that once you buy 2 houses, you can do what? Quit going to work. You still have to do whatever crappy job it is that you do. And unfortunately, you guys read about this all the time because it's on the internet, and everything that's on the internet is true. But you always read about the guy that was the janitor, or the guy that worked at the 5 and dime store that made $500 a week his entire life, and he's worth $2.5 million. Right? You read those stories all the time. That's a guy that understood the perseverance of work. He saved his money, he bought properties, he did whatever it was that he did, but he still went to that same crappy job every single day. So it's part of that is you've got to keep doing whatever it is you're doing. You've got to have good credit, but I'll be real honest, once you own 3 houses, what? Yeah, your credit is, A, they're not going to care, and B, your credit's probably going to be what? Probably pretty good. Because in a lot of circumstances, you're going to have the mortgage note that you're paying on. You're paying that all the time because it's being paid by somebody else. You may or may not be paying for power, utilities, this, that. You're paying taxes. There's a lot of things that are happening, and so your credit score is going to start to move up. But as Michael said, once you acquire 3 houses, then the bank is simply going to look at what you're dynamically doing, and they're going to be pretty cool with it when it gets right down to it. Crazy assumptions, okay? So it's going to take you 10 years to do that entire acquisition model. Do you need 673? And by the way, Randy's father had over 1,000 properties that he had acquired doing this exact thing.
In 10 years?
Yeah, it took him 10 years and he acquired over 1,000 properties. Because once you get to about 300, then what? Oh, good hell, your life just goes off the track. You don't know how many you buy, you don't. You guys will search this and you'll see this and you'll start to recognize it. When you're searching through the assessors for ownership history, and you'll see houses that are named after the street LLC. Investors do that because why? So they can remember where the hell the house was. They don't remember, because if they name it like Greg, and I'm just making fun of him because he's not here. I'd make fun of him if he's here too. Greg has, 50 different accounts for different things. He has a different password for each account. So Greg can get into what? Nothing. He can't get into anything because he never can remember the password for any of them. It becomes the same kind of thing where you don't remember what the name of the LLC was or this or that, but you had a house over on Jones, you had one on Varsity, you got one on University, and so then you just search for that, then you can find the houses that you own.
And that was like the land investor reading that. He has so many properties, he had to get Google Earth to map all the properties he has.
Yeah. What it took 1,000? What's he got? 2,000, 3,000 probably. Yeah. So I mean, so these are good problems to have, but they are things that happens. 10 years to pay off the first half, and I say 10 years to pay off the first half because you're going to do what? You're going to send in a little bit more money, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. Hopefully, 10 years to pay off the second half, and then at that point, even though they're a 30-year mortgage, if you send in that extra payment every year, then you're going to do what? You're going to cut it down to 20 years. So in 20 years, you're going to own all of these houses, free and clear. Well, what if you want to retire? Well, A, you can live off the income coming in from them. If you need a little bit more money than that, then you do what? So why don't you start selling houses? Yeah, you got a house that's 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. You sell one house for 400,000. Can you get by for a week?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just barely, right? I mean, it's tough, but it'll, you guys priced out jet aviation fuel. Thoughts to ponder. If the market goes up 3 to 10% over the course of the program, what's the future value? And that's kind of what we were talking about. So you buy it for 100,000, and if it goes up 10 or 15 or 20% or more, then your overall portfolio goes up. The great part about it is, from a rental perspective, is if they cash flow, and this is the reason you want to make sure that they cash flow on current values, not future values. If you've got it rented for 800, and the market for rents double to 1,600, you can rent yours out for how much? 800, because you're cash flowing at 800. How fast do you think your property will rent out? And I don't mean to brag in any way, shape, or form, but we've got a property that we've had, and it's going to pay off here next year, and I'm actually going to give the house to the lady. But I've had a house, and the lady's been in it for 28 years. Never has moved out. Pays $750 a month. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, Green Valley. 2-car garage.
And you never raised the rent?
I've never raised the rent on her. She's just the nicest lady that ever. I mean, when she was kind of my age, and she goes, I've got a daughter, and I want her to go to a good school. And so, she school, junior high, high school, and she's off to university, and mom's still there. And, yeah, and it was when I was working with Metropolitan Homes, and it was a model home, and then they moved it around the corner, and I ended up paying like $42,000 for it in '86. And so interest rates were higher, but we put a bunch down, and then we paid it off very quickly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, in my world, it's paid me back like 4 times. So,
And not only that, you keep the tenant if you don't raise the rent.
well, yeah,
Otherwise, you lose them every year, or
Yeah.
you're losing money.
yeah, you guys.
And that's my big spiel. It's like you are raising $25, $50 for losing a whole month and paying agents.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, you lose a month of rent, $1,200. You've got to pay an agent $500. So you're gonna
paint the house.
you got to repaint the house, do the carpet, put in a new fridge because they took it with them. And so it's $3,000 because you wanted to raise the rent $25.
You'd almost be better.
Greedy
You'd almost
overpays.
be better front loading that and saying, if rents today are 800, I think they're 1,000 next year. Go for 900 this year. Leave it empty on the front end. Once you get that 900 renter in there, keep them in forever.
Ever and ever and ever. Yeah, and it's a problematic conversation that we have. It's some things that we want to try and put together, some ancillary information. That's the name of the company, Vegas Home Advisor. The concept of it is look, we're not really here to sell you anything or whatever the case may be, but we want to give you good advice. We want to give you information that you can use. Unfortunately, I've got Michael working on a million different things, but I would love to have that rent calculator tool in there so that an owner could go in and put that information in and just see what that damage is. And then that's 1 year. How often do you think that's going to happen? Every other year? Okay, so in 15 years, your $2,000 damage is actually $30,000. Really? For $25 a month? And if you would have gotten $25 a month incrementally every year, you'd have made $2,000 versus the opportunity to live, stuff like that. But these are hard conversations that we have to have because nobody believes us, but heaven forbid they run into somebody on Zillow or somebody that lives next door who tells them, well, the neighbors, they're renting theirs out for $1,275. At $1,250, you're losing money. Well, let's talk about that. So,
It's a really good point.
yeah.
And not only that, like every couple of years you throw in, it's like if you're not moving, they're not raising your rent, people clean your carpet, whatever. These people stay, and you want them to stay. You give them nothing.
Yeah.
$850, $200 every couple of years.
But
And they stay.
I also think that some people think that they're gonna get a bunch of scumbag people that are gonna come in because you're paying $750, $850 a month. And the reality is there are a lot of very good, decent people
Right,
that are just cannot afford anything, and they will take care of that house better than you will.
right.
So the best piece of advice is to offer them to pay $35 to get a credit check and a background check.
Mhm.
Make sure they don't have a criminal record, make sure that they haven't skipped out on rent before,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever, that's that investment you do in renting the house, making sure you check the people out before you bring them in.
Well, and not for nothing, 750 was the fair market value when she rented that house.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that was what they were renting for
Mhm.
back then. So we just never moved it, you know, so if it was the same house today, would I probably charge a person that comes in today $1,200? Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you say, next year I'm not gonna go, well, it's $1,275, or next year it's 13, and I'm not gonna try and move it on them, because my costs are fixed, right? And my costs are really good if they don't do this. I mentioned it last week when we talked about this, and you guys, and I'll hit it again because it's like everything in life. Sometimes you have to kind of see things a couple of times before it makes sense. And Lynette, my sister-in-law, who kind of manages the properties for me, we came up with this years ago, and it truly, truly, truly works. So if we know that the owner wants to rent the property for $1,200, then we always tell them that it's what? It's always $1,300. But if they do it through auto pay, then it's $1,200. And then if they will actually, which they've got to do for auto pay, if they will create their Build-em, which is the software program we use for tracking, if they will do their account on Build-em, then we will actually go ahead and drop the rent another $50, so they'll pay $1,150. And by doing that, then if they have any repairs that need to be done, they go on and they do a request for repairs. The request for repair goes to the person that it needs to go to, as well as the owner. The owner actually approves the repair person to get involved with it, and our involvement is what? Zero. So I probably had them at 8%, which I can't do the math on that, but that's probably close to $100. And then who pays the $50? I do. So I get $50 for doing what? Waking up on the first of every month. So you know, think about that. As we move through the next few months, we'll move the property management back into here, and we'll kind of get more actively involved in it. Kathy's going to bring all of her stuff over after the first of the year. Numerically, we'll have the numbers to do that, but that's a business model that I absolutely love. And not to be weird about this, so you get somebody and they do this investment pyramid, who's going to manage that for them? Yeah. So imagine that you're managing 1,000. If you're managing 100 properties, you know, you're not going to work because you've probably got enough money coming in, right? That, you know, so that's the other end. The end of it for us as real estate agents. You're going to sell them every one of those houses. You're going to rent out every one of those houses. You're going to make a career of money.
So on Build-em, since you have to approve it, you get $50 for yourself that the owner will pay you.
Yeah, well, we get $80, and then I go to the tenant, and I go, hey, Louis, if you never call me, I'll knock $50 off the rent. What do you mean I'll never call me? How do I get stuff done? You go onto your account, and this is the list of people that do the problem. So if you have an electric problem, if you have a dishwasher disposal, if you have an AC problem, a heater problem, you call Rashid. If you have a carpet issue, if you have a tile issue, if you have an issue, you call Silas. If you know who, I give you the list.
Okay.
You don't call me and
Who
I'll.
pays them?
Huh?
Who pays these contractors?
Oh, the owner does.
Okay.
So then you send in a thing and you go, hey, Michael's the owner, hey, Michael, the garbage disposal's broke. Rashid came out, or Rashid sent me a thing and says or I sent a request to Rashid. Rashid's gonna get a hold of Michael and go, half horse, $240 installed. Michael's gonna go, okay, and Michael's gonna pay Rashid directly. We freaking do nothing. That's why I used to, I don't want to go negative, but that's what used to blow me away about the other companies. They had all these people doing all of these activities, but that was a different story because that was a cash cow for them. $68 for a service repair, they kept the $68. You know, if they could get somebody to do 3 service calls, then they just made $180 for nothing, for no work being done. That's a different story, but that's how I handle it. And look, do you want to call me and tell me what the problem is so I can call Rashid, and then Rashid can call Michael, and then Michael can call me, and then I can call you? Or would you rather handle it yourself? Yeah, let me handle it myself. And so it simply becomes super clean.
So out of the $100 you were gonna make, you're only making then
50.
50, and you're fine with that because you don't have to have no headaches.
I wake up.
That's it.
There's money in the account.
And if he doesn't ever call you, even better.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
Now, randomly, we have a guy that goes out and does the furnace filter changes every 3 months, does the fire thing, looks to see if there's any wild dogs, anything crazy in there. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, you know, I do a piss poor job at it because I'm not generating any additional business out of it, but I just don't have time to focus on it at the moment, and so I'm not worried about it.
So all these homes would carry a home warranty.
Oh, absolutely.
Every single one.
Every single one of them.
It's something that Michael wouldn't have to pay for,
And-
a water heater.
yeah.
Or
And I tell every homeowner, I go, look, you're silly if you don't get a home warranty, and randomly, you know, we change warranty companies because then if you change warranty company, you get a discount on this, that, or the other thing, and then they kind of try and lure you back, and then you get a discount on that too. So I mean, you know, you play all of that stuff, and Lynette does that. My ex-sister-in-law, she just sits at home in her pajamas, and that's what she does. So, yeah. Cool. Just not difficult. Okay. So then we end up with kind of a future value scenario, and then, you know, just the logo of this. So this is something that I think, you know, Michael, this is something that we could send to them or have somewhere on the website that then you could send out to people. This is a conversation starter, and that's the whole point of everything that we do is all we want to do is have a conversation. You know, and you know, for those of you that are a little bit kind of new, the conversation is what? Go to the website, have a look at it.
Yep.
They call you up and they have one question, you feel like answering the question, then you do what? Answer the question. If they have 3 questions and it's a little bit above what you can do, then what? You know, that's a great question. Why don't you come into the office and let's have a meeting with the broker, the owner, or somebody within the company, or another agent, or somebody on my team, or whatever that looks like. Right? You know, and that's the nature of the
When will this be available on the website?
I don't know. There you go.
10 minutes.
And for the record, Michael will show you. Michael, maybe I'll keep adding to his pile. This is available remotely. So there's a few people I know that have joined us today that aren't in the room today. Hopefully by next week we'll have a little screen where they're going to be able to join us if they've got questions that they want to ask into this deal. So if you've got people that you think that would be interested in these but they're not able to attend, you can send them the link, the hookup, the whatever the case may be, and they can watch it from wherever they are in the world.
And this is automatically recorded and available on YouTube, so I can send the links out to you guys and you can share them with anyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Will you do that, or do you want us to request
no,
that?
I'll do it.
You'll just do that?
It'll be an automatic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Are we
Yeah.
those that are